Well, good afternoon and welcome. Justice VandeWalle, this gathering today is confirmation of your positive impact on the North Dakota judicial system. We have a number of speakers today, so we're going to get right to them, and I'm certain there are many more who would have liked to share their thoughts on Justice VandeWalle. Our first speaker this afternoon is the Honorable Doug Burgum, Governor of the state of North Dakota. He was born in North Dakota, elected governor in 2016, and re-elected in 2020 as the 33rd governor of the state of North Dakota. Governor Burgum led Great Plains as a CEO through its initial public offering in 1997 and the acquisition by Microsoft Corporation in 2001. Like Justice VandeWalle, he was awarded the Theodore Roosevelt Rough Rider Award in 2019 by Governor John Hoeven. Governor Burgum.
Good afternoon, everyone. So great to see, but not surprising to see such a tremendous crowd here today. Today's a day of celebration, and today's a day of gratitude. And the guest of honor, of course, Chief Justice Jerry. So excited to see you here in person. I think everybody knows we've rescheduled this event a few times, but I guess when you've served as long as Jerry, then it's okay to grant yourself a continuance. So I was told that this was maybe going to be a roast and not just a gratitude thing, but then I checked and I thought, well, I'll just leave the roasting to Attorney General Wrigley, since he seems to be good at wanting to roast the Supreme Court these days. So. I got justices applauding over here in the front row on that one. That was like. Anyway, it's so great to be here with all of you, and so much has been said about Justice VandeWalle's incredible legacy of service. And as Chief Justice Jensen said, we have a lot of speakers today, so I just want you to know that I'm going to be brief. That was a lawyer joke, I think, but 27 years as Chief Justice, longest serving in North Dakota, 44 years on the Supreme Court, 64 years of service total to the state of North Dakota. The Chief's record of service will never be matched. It's one that inspires all of us in North Dakota. And also, little known, I know there's been a lot of talk about pension reform, but actually, in addition to serving for 64 years, he personally tried to keep the pension solvent by paying in for 64 years and never taking a dime out of it. So I think we owe him a round of applause just for that right there. That was incredible work. But Jerry, through it all, you've served with such humility. This is a credit to your upbringing on the family farm at Noonan, which I know is near and dear to you and to all of us. It's become legend, what you've done coming from that small town. And I think it really speaks to the heart and soul of what it means to be a North Dakotan. You ask us all to call you Jerry, but we have a hard time thinking of you as anything but the Chief, because you always embodied what that role should be. And on January 31st, which was his last working day in the Capitol, some of us lucky team members from the governor's office, we had the pleasure of walking down to the judicial wing and having a beautiful visit with the Chief. And at the end of that meeting, I had the opportunity to present him with a gift, which was an embossed leather case with a set of playing cards inside, two sets of playing cards. One had a Red Barn and one had a Holstein on it, in honor of the dairy. He's applauding now if you can't see that, in that dairy farm at Noonan. But as many of you may know, in addition to his incredible record, he's also been a Life Master bridge player. With that, I had a note that accompanied that. He asked me that day to read it to a couple people, and I thought that I would just share that note with everybody here. And I'll give a little extra emphasis to the letters that were in bold on the note. But it along with the playing cards, it said this: Your Honor, please accept this gift embossed in your honor. I hope card playing still appeals to you, but I'm certainly not one to judge your card playing abilities. As you cross the bridge into retirement, we hope you'll find supreme joy and discover that retired life suits you well. While we could never know what hand life will deal us, we can be certain that your dedication and years of service will never be trumped. Like a diamond, it seemed that you would be here forever, and there would have been no objection. You had fairness and compassion in spades. You weren't afraid, I know this too, Drew, you weren't afraid to break out the club if necessary. And as you can see from this full house, you've won our hearts. I guess you discovered the trick to a sustained, successful career, and now it's time to adjourn and to write the first sentence in your next chapter of your story. In my opinion, you're one of a kind. On behalf of all North Dakotans, thank you, Jerry. We deeply and gratefully wish you all the best. Congratulations on your retirement, Justice VandeWalle. North Dakota is a better place, will always be a better place because of your incredible service to our state. On behalf of all North Dakotans, we say thank you.
Thank you, Governor Burgum. Our next speaker is the Honorable Drew Wrigley, Attorney General for the state of North Dakota. He was also born in North Dakota, spent 5 years as the Assistant District Attorney in Philadelphia. From 2001 to 2009 was North Dakota's 17th Attorney General, was Lieutenant Governor of the state of North Dakota from December 2010 through to December of 2016. And from 2019 to 2021, he was North Dakota's 19th United States Attorney, and from February 22 to present, he has been North Dakota's Attorney General.
Did everybody get a chance to read my remarks? Just making sure. Thank you for the opportunity to be up here for a second. I got a note a few weeks ago, actually when this was planned the first time, from former Governor Al Olson, former Attorney General as well, who works so closely with Chief Justice VandeWalle. And if I could, I promised him I'd share this message with you. And he was very emotional on the phone. He's not able to be here, but he appreciated this being shared with everybody. Physical distance, personal age, and the vagaries of January weather on the northern plains all suggest I not risk travel to Bismarck to celebrate the life and legal career of my dear friend and professional political colleague of more than 60 years, Chief Justice Jerry VandeWalle. We first met at UND when I joined his fraternity, Lambda Chi Alpha. I followed him through UND Law School, and years later when I was elected Attorney General in 1972, we reconnected in that office where he began his distinguished legal career. I asked him to remain, and he accepted the appointment as first Assistant Attorney General. He was then elected to the North Dakota Supreme Court to later become the Chief Justice. He is America's longest-serving state Supreme Court Justice. Jerry, yours has truly been one of the most distinguished legal and judicial careers in American history. Godspeed, my friend, and may the wind always be at your back, Al Olson. I took the liberty, I saw Justice VandeWalle's, the text of his remarks here today, and just to prepare you, when he stands up after all this, he's going to begin with a simple line, enough about you, let's talk more about me. Chief, you've worked yourself into the limelight again here, I see. Pretty standard fare for you. Some years back, when I was serving as Lieutenant Governor, a colleague of mine from my U.S. Attorney years, the first go-around, Mike Hevikin, gave me a call, and he was at that time serving, and still is, I believe, as the Chief Justice of the Nebraska Supreme Court. And he called and he asked me if I knew, he said, I'm sure you've heard of, but he said, do you know Jerry VandeWalle? And I said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, Mike, I do. And we talked a while about a couple of things. I mentioned that the chief and my dad grew up near each other. My dad was from Columbus, but his farm was actually closer to Noonan. And the chief and my dad share a birthday, actually. And it was my dad who introduced me to then Justice, then later Chief Justice, VandeWalle, at Ed Schaefer's first inaugural. Actually, because of the weather, I think that turned out to be, Harmsey, was that the only inaugural? I think it was the only one that they held. I remember meeting him there. It was just before I moved to Philadelphia, and I was so struck by all the people he should be talking to, all the important people in this room. And he seemed genuinely interested in talking about what I was going to be doing, what I was going to Philadelphia for, what I wanted out of my legal career, and said, I bet we'll see you back someday. Well, in fact, that came to pass. So we have similar root systems, Chief, and I'm guessing that the Supreme Court would say, and that's where it ends. But years later, when I was Lieutenant Governor, I remember coming in 3 weeks after I was sworn in or so. We were in here on a Saturday, and my then young daughter and short daughter, Quinn, walked in. She had met him exactly one time. How many people over the years? How many young people over the years? How many names? We walked into this hall on a Saturday, and he was walking back and forth, as he'll often do. I could see his shadow down here. I still remember it. Quinn, being Quinn, for those of you who know her, this tall. Hi, Chief! She yells down the hall. He yells back, hi, Quinn! She grew this much. Just like her old man all those years before. You have a great many special qualities. Making people feel important in your presence and in your friendship is one of them for sure. The chief has often told me that his favorite job that he ever had was being Chief Deputy Attorney General of the state of North Dakota. When I selected a new Chief Deputy for the office, he was kind enough to agree to come to the office and swear in Claire Ness as our Chief Deputy, which he did from memory, by the way, as he went through, showing off again. And we sat down and had coffee afterward, and several times since. And I'm reminded again and again that we think he's nice. I mean, he's pretty nice. But he's a storehouse of historical information, a tactical mind, an incredible administrative mind, among his many gifts. Well, Judge, we all know a lot of lawyers who become known, some who even become liked, more who are tolerated. There really is none. There's none. I'm not a young guy anymore. I can say with some authority there's none more revered. None that I've known in my life more deeply respected. And none that I can think of more universally loved. My last meeting as Lieutenant Governor, I asked to meet with then Chief Justice VandeWalle. I went down there at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and he asked me, Drew, is everything okay? And I said, it is. I just wanted this to be the last thing on my calendar. Before all of that, the day came when Jack Dalrymple was going to appoint the chief to the Theodore Roosevelt Hall of Fame. I mean, he thinks you're okay, but he'd heard me talk about you a lot over the years, and he thought I might consider that an honor. I'll never forget, he looked down at the end of the table, and he had made his final decision. He said, Drew, why don't you go down and let the chief know? That was the highlight of my years as Lieutenant Governor. Walking down the hall, going to the court, asking to see the chief, and informing him that the governor was placing him in the Theodore Roosevelt Hall of Fame. I appreciated that opportunity to be there, to see your reaction. You're not the world's greatest, at listening to people praise you. I've noticed that across the years. Then as now, I love you, Chief. The whole Wrigley family loves you. Thanks for your service to the state.
Thank you, Attorney General Wrigley. Our next speaker is the Honorable Daniel Crothers, Justice of the North Dakota Supreme Court. He has been a colleague of Justice VandeWalle since 2005 until retirement in January of this year. Justice Crothers.
I'm not accustomed to taking the podium after the governor and the attorney general. I wasn't aware that they had all the jokes today. But I do pay attention, or at least I try, and so I'm going to do the unspeakable for a lawyer and for a judge. I'm going to get rid of page 1 and jump right to the message. And my message follows that by both of those who preceded me here, and that is a message of thanks and appreciation. Justice VandeWalle, Chief Justice VandeWalle, Chief Jerry, those are the names by which we know this great man. Thank you for 29 years as Chief Justice. Thank you for 44 years on the court. Thank you for dedicating your lifetime to the state of North Dakota. Many dedicate a lifetime to a career, or at least have a career that is segmented, and they dedicate themselves to that career. You've had, as you've heard, as everybody's heard, at least 2 careers in the state, in the Attorney General's office and on the court. And as I'll speak in a moment, those of you who know him well know that he also has had a career in activity outside of the state. Thank you for all of those careers on behalf of people in North Dakota and elsewhere. Thank you for setting the bar high and for setting the high professional tone for the North Dakota Supreme Court, for the District Court, and for all of the lawyers across the state of North Dakota. Thank you for thinking about more than just deciding cases. As you know, when somebody thinks of courts or judges, they think of the adjudication we do. But you always took time to think about how those cases get to the courts and how they are resolved by judges. And that included deep consideration of all of the employees and the staff and the clerks within the court system. And you spent time making their jobs important jobs. You nurtured and supported generations of judicial branch employees. And in the process, you created and energized and allowed people to innovate and created a workforce that is supportive and effective and continues to be that. Thank you also for your years of being the perfect face for the state of North Dakota. You've been the face for the North Dakota Judicial Branch, but as I mentioned earlier, you've also been the face of North Dakota across the country. As you know, I frequently teach and I'm active within the American Bar Association, and I run across people, and I have very seldom gone to any group of judges or any group of lawyers within the ABA and not run into somebody who said, "Say hi to Jerry when you get home." And that wasn't just years ago or when I started on the court. It happened as recently as 10 days ago when I was teaching in South Carolina, and former American Bar Association President William Hubbard, now Dean of the University of South Carolina School of Law, said, "Say hi to Jerry," as did Professor Miles Link, and as did several senior counsel within the American Bar Association, Dennis Rendelman and Ellen Rosen. Again, everywhere I go, I come home with, "Say hi to Jerry, how's Jerry doing?" And finally, on a personal note, thank you for being a big influence on my legal career and in my career as a judge. You've made me a better person. You've made me a better judge. I thank you for it. Thank you for your service to the state of North Dakota.
Thank you, Justice Crothers. Our next speaker is the Honorable Lisa Fair McEvers, Justice of the North Dakota Supreme Court. She's been a colleague of the Chief since 2014 until his retirement.
It's good to see you today. I'm glad to be here to honor Justice VandeWalle upon his retirement. But before I get into his accolades, and you've already heard quite a few, I want to thank a few people here on behalf of the court who organized this situation. First of all is Clerk of Court, Petra Holm. Would you stand up? Where are you, Petra? Oh, she's in the back, probably working. She worked hard to organize this not only once, but twice. She, along with Jeannie Walstead, who was at that time working as my interim judicial assistant for the second time, organized much of this event, along with some other committee members who are also here, and I thank them. I also want to tell the chief that the decorations were provided by Danny and his business, KW Couture, and at no expense. He wanted your event to have a special touch. So those are from Danny Walstead. So thank you all for putting this event together for us. Many of Justice VandeWalle's accomplishments have already been highlighted by others and are in the program. If you notice, they had to use the very smallest font that they have on a computer in order to get them all in there. There are a couple more things that are not noted in there that I would like to tell you about him. He not only graduated magna cum laude from law school, he was first in his class. So right from the get-go, he was number one and exceptional as a leader in the law. He has been on this court for so long that he had to run for his seat 5 times. And he only had 1 contested election. So that speaks volumes to the respect that the other lawyers didn't even want to bother to run against him. I was lucky enough to know Justice VandeWalle before I went to law school when I was a court employee, and it's already been mentioned that he looked out for court employees, and he did. I served on committees and went to presiding judges' meetings as an assistant where he was the Chief Justice. And Justice VandeWalle always made me feel welcome and not lesser than because I was a mere judicial assistant instead of a lawyer. When I was at law school and I was there as a 1L and the court came to see the moot court, we had a reception afterwards, and in this group of hundreds of people, he hollered out, "Hey Lisa, how you doing?" I was a first-year law student, and the Chief Justice takes the time to greet me in a reception. That's the kind of man that he was. He made everyone feel welcome. We all owe him a great debt. He did so much to encourage men and women in the law to aspire to be good lawyers, judges, and to assume leadership positions in the bar, the courts, and our communities. Thank you for that leadership. After I went to law school, I clerked at the Supreme Court 25 years ago, and I remember distinctly that there were rumors that the Chief Justice VandeWalle at that time, 25 years ago, he was in his late 60s, there were rumors that he was going to retire. It did make sense. He had 20 years in at the Attorney General's office and another 20 at the Supreme Court, but he was not even close, not by a long shot. And we've all been benefactors of that extra time that we've had the opportunity to spend with him. As have already been noted, his attributes are many. He is kind and approachable. He's been a good mentor to me and to many others. He's a common sense judge. He had a brilliant legal mind. He's self-deprecating. If you've ever been around him, despite everybody telling him how wonderful he is all the time, he makes fun of himself. He'll make fun of his size 15 shoes and his terrible singing voice, but I'm going to tell you, I've heard him sing and it's not that bad. He sometimes referred to us on the court, and even some retiring judges and justices, as just babies. We knew he said it with affection, and his perspective was fair, since he'd been a lawyer since before most of us were born, and has been on this court since I was a junior in high school, and at least one member of our court was still in daycare. Despite what others might see as a generation gap, I found we had things in common. We shared stories of our families, our small-town upbringings, and our faith. Over the last 9 years, I stopped often at his office and he mine to discuss our cases, our mutual friends, our acquaintances, his affection for UND, and I would note, Chief, the dean is here today, came from the law school, I saw him. You've been part of so many special events in my life, and I expect the lives of other people here in the audience. Thank you for that. A while back, I was interviewed about Justice VandeWalle. Apparently, they're writing a book or something, right? So the interviewer asked me, or referred to Justice VandeWalle as Saint Jerry, or the Archangel VandeWalle. And I laughed and I said, well, I know better than that. He's no angel. He's perfectly capable of playing the devil's advocate, and he has. He occasionally lost his temper. I don't know if he still loses his temper, but he's lost it on me once or twice. Just like we all do. He's a human being. He doesn't wear a halo. He's not perfect, but he's very close to it. He has been the master of civil discourse and a strong proponent of collegiality on the court for many years. Does anybody here remember the sitcom Everybody Loves Raymond? Recall the family where Raymond is the golden boy and the brother can't seem to do anything right or gain affection of his family? That was sort of what it was like to serve alongside Justice VandeWalle. Everybody loves Jerry. To be with him is often to be invisible, and yet he always made the effort to bring you into the conversation and introduce you to the folks you don't know. We've been so fortunate to have the chief lead the judicial branch for many years with his common sense eye to positive change that has been seen around the country. Many changes took place under your watch, but you did not bend to the winds of change for change's sake. Rather, you were always trying to improve the status quo. You were a steadfast guardian of the law, and I'm going to tell you that his opinions have had a great impact on the development of law in the state of North Dakota and even nationally. He's been reversed only once by the United States Supreme Court. That was in 1992, a taxation case under the Commerce Clause. But he eventually had the last laugh when the United States Supreme Court reversed itself. So it appears he was right all along. I have had the rare opportunity to serve alongside a giant in the law, a living legend. Thank you for your many years of service to the law, the court, the law school, the state, and indeed the nation. No one will ever be able to fill your size 15 shoes, and it's been an honor to stand in your long shadow. Best wishes in your retirement.
Thank you, Justice McEvers. Our next speaker is Justice Carol Kapsner, who was a colleague of the Chief's from October of 1998 until July of 2017. She is unavailable today, so her remarks will be read by Justice Crothers.
Yes, sorry, Governor and Attorney General, I didn't tell you that part about getting rid of page 1 of my talk, but I get a second crack at it. Actually, Justice Kapsner, if you knew our relationship, we were a little bit of oil and vinegar. And so when she asked me to do this, I was surprised, but not entirely, because the end of her request was, and read it like I wrote it. So as far as she knows, she's out of town. As far as she knows, this is exactly what she wrote. These are Justice Kapsner's remarks. Jerry, Chief Justice, Justice VandeWalle, I regret that I'm not in Bismarck to give the remarks that I planned to give at the celebration as originally scheduled. I served on the Supreme Court from 1998 to 2017, during which time Jerry VandeWalle was my Chief Justice. There are so many things to talk about, but I will focus on one. As Chief Justice, Jerry VandeWalle was always concerned that the North Dakota judiciary be involved in and indeed have influence on the national judicial scene. North Dakota should never be a parochial enclave, but should interact with and understand what is happening with judiciaries throughout the nation. Consequently, trial judges and North Dakota Supreme Court justices were sent to study at national learning centers. And Justice Crothers, during my tenure, and undoubtedly still was and is a frequent instructor at the National Judicial College. She really wrote that. That's really here. just reading it. Our professional staff was likewise expected to participate in their respective organizations and frequently rose to lead those organizations. Penny Miller, for example, who is here today. Good to see you, Penny. She rose to be the president of the National Organization of Supreme Court Clerks. Many of our trial court personnel, some of whom I have seen here today, similarly rose to and were honored for their work and led their respective organizations. In his belief that we North Dakota judges and court personnel should be out there in the larger judicial world, Chief Justice VandeWalle was our leader and our example. He did it all. He served on and chaired committees of the American Bar Association, the National Center for State Courts, the Judicial Conference of the United States, the Conference of Chief Justices, and of course the North Dakota Judicial Conference before he became Chief Justice. Not only did he serve, but nearly always his service was recognized by an award. When I started to prepare these remarks, I realized that simply listing the awards would take the time I was allotted. So let me just tell you about the Robert J. Kutak Award. The Kutak Award is given to someone who champions collaboration between the legal academy, the practicing bar, and the judiciary. It is given by the American Bar Association section of legal education and admissions to the bar. Jerry had served this committee as co-chair of the admissions committee and as chair of this section. Jerry had steered me into service on this section, and I served both the Standards Review Committee, which writes the standards that controls law schools, and later on the Accreditation Committee for law schools. Knowing that Jerry's service perfectly fit the criteria for the Kutak Award, and knowing by then the people who would be influencing who received this award, I began a series of phone calls. Those calls went to law school deans, to chief justices, to bar examiners, and to people who served on ABA committees. Not one of them refused my phone call. Not one expressed even a second of hesitancy when asked for a letter of support for the award. Most of the phone calls ended with the message, "Say hi to Jerry," which of course I could not pass on because he would know what I was up to. The responses were typical because Jerry was so well known that North Dakota judges traveling anywhere in the country, and anytime they were in the presence of judges anywhere else, were sent home with the directive, as I indicated before. "Oh, you must know Jerry VandeWalle. Please say hi to him." Everywhere people felt a connection with him. Everywhere, once that connection was made, they were friends. Chief Justice VandeWalle did receive the Kutak Award in 2009, but his string of awards did not begin there, nor did they end there. In 2015, Chief Justice VandeWalle received another extremely significant award, the Harry L. Carrico Award for Judicial Innovation. That award is given by the National Center for State Courts to someone who inspired, sponsored, promoted, or led an innovation or accomplishment of national significance in the field of judicial administration. Chief Justice VandeWalle's recognition was for the awareness and protection of the elderly from physical, emotional, and financial exploitation. What was particularly unusual about this award was that 16 state chief justices and 23 state court administrators, on their own initiative, without being asked, nominated him for the award. Jerry's influence was widespread. But I also want to say, and this follows Justice McGever's comments, but I also want to say, as someone who literally sat next to Jerry VandeWalle at court conferences for just short of 19 years, that you do not know the man if you do not also know that he is fun and sometimes full of mischief. You could see the mischief rising to the surface when he would get the gleam in his eyes, rub his hands together, and then say the most outrageous things. Those 19 years were the most wonderful years of my life. Thank you, Jerry VandeWalle. With love and gratitude, Carol Kapsner.
Thank you for reading those remarks, Justice Crothers. Our next speaker is Justice Dale Sandstrom, who served as a colleague of the Chiefs from December of 1992 until December of 2016.
Jerry VandeWalle, first my mentor, then my colleague and friend. In July of 1958, after having grown up on a dairy farm in Noonan, in Divide County in the far northwestern corner of the state, and having said that the cows sent you to law school in more ways than one, you graduated at the top of your class, served as editor-in-chief of the Law Review, and then in July of 1958, you walked through that door right down the hall here, become an assistant, a special assistant attorney general with a firm commitment to stay for 1 year. You stayed for 20 years. We overlapped in the Attorney General's office for 3 of those years. Then in 1978, after having served under Republican attorneys general, you were appointed to the Supreme Court by a Democrat governor. A few months later, you had to run in a contested election. I was one of many who wrote letters of support of your campaign, in which you were elected and then never challenged again. You served on the North Dakota Supreme Court for 44 and a half years, and I was privileged to overlap with you there for 24 of those years, and serving as Chief Justice for longer than anybody else in state history. People have often asked me, what can you tell me about Jerry VandeWalle's judicial philosophy? And I'd say, he wants the law to make sense. He wants the law to make sense. He never thought that the court should invade the province of the executive branch or the legislative branch. In 1979, a year into his tenure, he wrote the landmark decision of Power Fuels versus Elkin, which is no doubt the most quoted case of the North Dakota Supreme Court, which expressed great deference for executive branch decisions reviewed under the Administrative Agencies Practice Act, great deference for their factual findings. He never thought that the judiciary should stretch or contort the Constitution or statutes in order to achieve a particular result. His colleagues nationally elected him to be the chair of the Conference of Chief Justices in the United States. As chair of the Conference of Chief Justices, he was the chief spokesman for the state courts in the United States, courts which handle 97% of the court cases in this country. He was beloved and is beloved by and respected by his colleagues across the nation, as well as those here in North Dakota. He served in the North Dakota State Capitol for 64 and a half years. That's approximately 1/2 the history of North Dakota as a state. He served on the North Dakota Supreme Court for 44 and a half years, 1/3 of the history of North Dakota as a state. Not only is he the longest serving Supreme Court justice, he is the longest serving statewide elected official in North Dakota since statehood. He's the longest serving Chief Justice. Jerry, you've told me that records are made to be broken. But count me among the many who believe that your record of service and devotion to the state of North Dakota and its people will never be equaled. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Sandstrom. Our next speaker is the Honorable William Newman, surrogate judge, district court judge in the state of North Dakota from 1979 to 1992, and a colleague of the Chiefs on the North Dakota Supreme Court from November 1992 through March of 2005. Justice Newman?
Good afternoon, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, Chief. What a great afternoon this is to get together, drink a little coffee, soak up some sunshine, maybe swap stories about our friend, Jerry VandeWalle, and to celebrate all that Jerry has been and still is for us here and for all of the people of this very fortunate state. Jerry and I both are from Divide County in the far northwest corner of the state. We're small town, rural North Dakota boys. Our parents tried to bring us up so as not to embarrass them or ourselves. And Jerry's parents were remarkably successful in that. As you've heard, Jerry graduated from the School of Law at the University of North Dakota and went to work for the Attorney General. And there's a rich cache of stories he could share with you from those years, but those are for him and perhaps a few others to tell. I've enjoyed hearing some of them, but I didn't live them, so I'll defer to more knowledgeable folks to offer those gems to you. As I recall, it was 1978 when Jerry was appointed to the North Dakota Supreme Court, and a year later I was appointed to the District Court, and we started to get to know each other. In the fall of '92, I was elected to the Supreme Court, and very shortly thereafter, Jerry became the Chief Justice, following the retirement of Chief Justice Ralph Erickstead. And what had started as a professional acquaintanceship began to grow into a friendship. And though Jerry may not realize it, as several other folks have mentioned today, it also became a mentorship. He has taught me a great deal, probably much more than he realizes. Now his retirement takes me back through the years that we've known each other and our time together in the North Dakota Judicial Branch. Jerry, I'm proud to say that I've gotten to know you well, and I'm very pleased to tell you how deeply I appreciate all that you've been to me and to the people of North Dakota. In Jerry's office, there's a cute little statue of a bear dressed as a judge, a gift that he received. And if you turn it over, on the bottom there's a quote from Justice John Marshall, the fourth Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. It says, "The acme of judicial distinction is the ability to look a lawyer straight in the eyes for 2 hours and not hear a damned word he says." But that isn't Jerry. Everyone who ever argued in front of Justice VandeWalle knew that Jerry was listening closely and thinking carefully about everything that was said. Jerry, by your example, you've taught me, all of us, patience, kindness, and respect for others. Even when, as so often happens, we may disagree with what those others are saying, or we may not feel the patience we're trying to show. You're an example of true leadership and of the service to others that true leadership entails. The state has been enriched by your generous career of public service, and my life has been enriched by knowing you. Thank you for the many years of service and for the outstanding example you've set for all of us. You're truly a good guy and a blessing to know. It's a great privilege for me to call you both my colleague and my friend, and I thank you.
Thank you, Justice Newman. Our next speaker is the Honorable Daniel Traynor, United States District Judge of the United States District Court for the District of North Dakota. Judge Traynor.
Thank you, Chief. Gerald VandeWalle was appointed to the Supreme Court on August 15 of 1978. It happened to be his birthday. I was 8 years old at the time. 20 years later, he was Chief Justice, and I had the privilege of serving as his law clerk. It was a great first job as a young lawyer. You can easily judge the character of a man by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. And working for Chief Justice VandeWalle imbued in me a deep appreciation for the example of a good man and a great judge. We are here to celebrate and honor that great judge, who is a person who carefully maintained his role as a judge. This North Dakota State Capitol building contains this memorial hall, which encourages a meeting point between the executive and legislative branches of state government. It is in that way that law is made. Although it was not initially designed this way, Chief Justice Ralph Eriksted's judicial wing placed the judicial branch at the far east end of the Capitol, about as far away from the legislature as possible. Perhaps that design was not by accident. It is a reminder of the great temptation on the part of judges to become legislators, and how that role should be as far as proper as one end of this building is from east to west. I'll give you an example of how Gerald VandeWalle thought of that when he served on our Supreme Court. Article 1, Section 9 of the North Dakota Constitution says, quote, "Suits may be brought against the state in such manner, in such courts, and in such cases as the Legislative Assembly may, by law, direct," unquote. That provision is pretty clear. In fact, in 1991, Chief Justice Erikstad wrote a majority opinion that reaffirmed the decades-long holding of our Supreme Court that state sovereign immunity is a matter expressly entrusted to the legislature, upholding the plain meaning of that constitutional provision. But just 3 years later, with a different makeup on our Supreme Court, state sovereign immunity was abrogated. The express provision in our Constitution was cast aside as nothing more than, quote, "a common law doctrine that no longer meets the needs of our time," unquote. Chief Justice VandeWalle dissented and said, quote, "I shudder to think of how many other constitutional provisions and protections are rooted in common law doctrine, or are, in the opinion of a few judges, outdated and no longer warranted," unquote. VandeWalle warned that an unprincipled judiciary who contrives theories to overrule precedent and set aside constitutional provisions with which it does not agree is totalitarian and dangerous. Judges are given lifetime tenure or extended terms with the understanding that we will prudentially exercise our unaccountable judicial power. In a state like ours, where the legislature and citizens can amend the Constitution so easily, the words in the Constitution should mean what they say. In many cases, judges are celebrated for their landmark decisions that make the right call at the right time, and Chief Justice VandeWalle has had his share of those. Lisa McEvers mentioned Quill versus North Dakota, where he was 20 years ahead of the United States Supreme Court, but he also had opinions on election law and school funding. But Gerald VandeWalle's career should be exemplified as one where he showed the humility to exercise judicial restraint, where raw judicial power to define rights was held back in deference to the political branches that are more accountable to the people. That is the hallmark of Chief Justice Gerald VandeWalle, the good man and great judge we honor today. He is a person of great integrity and deep Catholic faith. North Dakota is so fortunate to have had his example of leadership and humility on our Supreme Court. And in preparation for this, I contacted Chief Justice John Roberts of the United States Supreme Court, and he was kind enough to provide a letter that I'd like to read. It's dated December 15 of 2022. Dear Chief Justice VandeWalle, I am pleased to be among your judicial colleagues congratulating you on your upcoming retirement after more than 44 years as a member of the North Dakota Supreme Court, including more than a quarter century as Chief Justice. With your steady pace, profound humility, and deep and enduring commitment to public service, your career has exemplified important ideals of judges in our country. Thank you for your lifetime of dedication to the rule of law and your many years of contributions to the courts, including as president of the Conference of Chief Judges and as a member of the Federal State Jurisdiction Committee of the Judicial Conference. I extend my best wishes for your good health and happiness in your next chapter. Sincerely, John Roberts. Congratulations, Chief.
Our next speaker is Kathy Arneson, who worked with the Chief as an executive judicial assistant.
Good afternoon. It was my honor to serve as Justice VandeWalle's judicial assistant for 20 years. My remarks today refer to Justice VandeWalle as the Chief. So with all due respect, Chief Justice Jensen, I ask that you indulge me for a few minutes. When I was asked to speak today, my first thought was, how does one condense 20 years of memories into a few minutes? Simple answer, you don't. And so I touch on just a few. Although no 2 days were ever alike in chambers, some things were consistent. The Chief was very punctual. He arrived for work at precisely the same time each day. He greeted each person with a hearty hello, starting in the clerk's office and working his way down the hall to his office. He would set his briefcase down, go around the corner to hang up his coat, pour a cup of coffee, and begin his day. Many days there was a steady flow of people needing his attention. And whether it was a routine question or someone's hair was on fire, the Chief handled each circumstance calmly and thoughtfully. The Chief took a special interest in the court family, treating all of us as he would his own. Whether it be the birth of a child or a grandchild, a wedding, an illness, or death, he genuinely cared deeply for us, sharing in our joys as well as our sorrows. Now, we all know what a treasure the Chief has been to our state as well as on a national level. He has met and visited with many prominent figures throughout the years. He has received numerous awards and accolades, also richly deserved. And while I know he has been honored and humbled by it all, I personally believe that some of the things that bring him the most joy and happiness are a trip to Medora and the Badlands he loves so much, a get-together with friends and relatives in his hometown of Newnan, and his dear nieces, greats, great-greats, of whom he speaks of often and is so proud. He always welcomed a surprise drop-in visitor, whether it be a fellow Noonanite, a college fraternity brother, or a friend or relative he hadn't seen for several years. The Chief would bring them into his office, show them his messy desk, and say, "This is how I work." Then he would usher them into his conference room for a cup of coffee and conversation. Speaking of visitors, the Chief especially enjoyed the little visitors, the children. His face would light up when they stopped by, and the little ones were naturally drawn to him. The Chief had a stuffed New Year's bear in his office that he received as a gift in the year 2000. When you squeeze the bear's paw, it counts down from 10, loudly proclaims, "Happy New Year, welcome to the year 2000, and then bells and whistles go off, and a rousing rendition of Auld Lang Syne begins to play. The Chief would ask each little visitor if they'd like to see his bear. He would take it down from the shelf and tell them to squeeze the bear's paw. The look of delight on the Chief's face as he watched their reaction was priceless. Now, After you have listened to this bear over and over, it starts to get a tad bit annoying. So, Chief, I have to confess, beginning in about the year 2012, after listening to this bear for what felt like the 900th time, I wanted to punch that little bugger right in the face. I have to share one story about the chief, simply because I get a visual each time I think about it, and I remember the exact words of the email. We all know that air travel can be a challenge. Most often, the chief's travels went smoothly, but on this particular trip, there were delays which caused him to miss the late flight out of the cities into Bismarck. When I got to work the next morning, I opened my email, and there was one from the chief sent at about 11:30 the previous night. Justice Crothers, you might remember this because I think you came around the corner about the time I opened the email. Now bear in mind, the chief was probably about 80 years young at the time. The email read, "Lying on the floor of the Minneapolis airport. We'll catch the first flight out in the morning. Don't cancel my appointments." When he came in later that morning, I said, "Chief, you know there's a hotel connected to the airport, right?" His response was, "Oh, the airport provided us with mats to lie on. It was fine." In closing, I share something that will stay with me always. As I would get ready to leave at the end of each day, I'd poke my head in and say, "Good night, Chief, see you tomorrow." And he would say to me, "Thank you, Kathy." Every single day, "Thank you." Just two simple words, but what an impact those words had on me. So now, Chief, it is my turn to say thank you. Thank you for your kindness, your friendship, your caring heart. Thank you for you. It has been an honor to have worked for you, and I am truly grateful and blessed. I wish you a long, happy, fulfilling retirement. And my dear friend, please know you will always be my chief. Thank you.
Our next speaker is our guest of honor, the chief.
Possibly top that. No way. I don't know where to begin to express my thanks except to say thank you to the court and to Petra and to the staff. I do know that the court authorizes it, the staff carries it out and does the hard work. But Chief Justice Jensen, the other justices, thank you so much. To all of you, thank you for your participation. I don't know the person you were talking about today. I wish I did. My dad must be rolling in his grave. He did not want me to work for the state of North Dakota. He thought I was putting my feet into the trough too much. So you heard the history of my being in the Attorney General's office. The dean came into my office one day and said, dean called me into his office one day and said, "I understand you have a job in Williston." I said, "A potential job, yes, with a firm. I want to do oil and gas work." And he said, "Well, we send a student each year to Bismarck. We want you to take it for a year." I said, "Okay, fine." He said, "I've talked to the firm. They'll agree to wait." So I said, "Good." So I went down at the end of the year. Mr. Burgum, Leslie Burgum, who was Attorney General, offered me a job that was created by the 1959 legislature. It was an oil and gas attorney, and it was specifically line item in the Attorney General's budget, and it was $15,000 for the biennium. That meant $7,500 a year. And that was my start. And I stayed, and I loved it. Dad, I'm sorry I stayed for you, but for me, it was a perfect job. I do enjoy the legislature. I enjoy the executive branch and all the others. And I think that if I did learn one lesson, it is that when I left the state, I was proud to be from North Dakota. And it's because of people like you that I am so proud to be from North Dakota. I want to thank all the speakers. They were excellent. They said way more nice things than I ever deserved in my life, and I never could even live up to what they pretended to be. I did learn one thing, however, it's the series that everyone has their own worth, and I learned that quickly from hired men that we had on the farm. Some of them couldn't read as write as well as I did. They could do things with their hands that I could never have begun to do. So I realized that every person has their own worth and own talents, and mine were limited. Quite frankly, I wish I could. Never cared how the car ran. I just wanted it to run correctly, how it ran. But that was beside the point. Anyhow, thank you very much for being here. I'm sorry for blubbering, but it's the way it's got to be. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Phone down. Thank you, Chief. Chief, as indicated when we started today, there are many more people who could have shared and wish they could share their thoughts and memories today. Your service to the state of North Dakota is legendary. On behalf of everyone gathered here today, and for those who are thinking of you today, let me wish you well and extend my congratulations on an outstanding career of service to the state of North Dakota. Thank you to all of our speakers today, and to Petra Holm, the clerk of the Supreme Court, and everyone else involved in arranging today's events. That ends our formal program today, and please feel free to remain and enjoy the refreshments.